Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my Cedar Point Recreation Park. I'm back from taking another tiny little break and ready to put down some more builds for flat rides around the park. There's still quite a lot of little carousels and scramblers and things like that we need to hammer out that I've been putting off. Starting here with Cedar Downs Racing Derby, which we built all the way back in episode 16. And you might recall that I was complaining at the time that it didn't calculate stats, and I was very upset that something was broken, or seemed to be. Turns out I just needed to wait a little bit, as the ride has been working fine for a while. I'm not really sure what happened there. I kind of suspect that it has something to do with the fact that we built it right after Windseeker, which is a very long ride, and it might have taken a long time for Windseeker to calculate stats, and that was what this was waiting on. Who knows? Hard to say. Whatever the cause, I am happy to say that all of our rides are back to normal and functioning and everything, except Max Air, as we mentioned before. Everything is working as intended. But yeah, for today we're just putting down some structures around all these little flat rides. And a lot of these I feel like are starting to become the most challenging rides to build stations for, as they're all a little bit different. They all have slightly different shapes and sizes. So I really have to get creative with roofing and queues and things like that. So for a lot of the builds that we did today, I wound up with some structures that are pretty okay, but I'm not super happy with them necessarily from an artistic standpoint. So like I always say, I'm gonna give myself the opportunity later to go back and tweak things. Right now, I just want to focus on getting stuff built as much as I can, getting the layout of all the rides in place, all the paths, everything. And later, if I decide that there's room for improvement on the building structures, we can make those changes at that time. So if I happen to come on some designs that I like, cool, but I'm not going to stress too much about making everything perfect on this go-around. Like I keep saying, I'm mostly just happy to get rid of some of these purple and red grids. Adding anything in there is going to help make the park look a little bit nicer. And we're getting some more rides opened up as well. There have been a couple that are still in testing. Later on we get to Pipe Scream and Wilderness Run that have been in testing mode for a very long time. And we finally opened those up to peeps. So after Cedar Downs, we worked a little bit on a Scrambler and Matterhorn, the other two flat rides on the main Midway. And it turns out I did myself a little bit of a disservice by making Matterhorn 5x5, which is kind of an awkward footprint to build station for because it's really hard to use track architecture for roofing. So I wound up going with just regular scenery, and I think that actually turned out probably better than what I was aiming for originally with the track architecture roof. Things look a little bit flat compared to real life. The real life structure has a nice round, almost like a circus tent kind of topper on it, which isn't really reflected well in what I wound up with here on Matterhorn, but I think what I have, even if it's not realistic, still looks pretty good. And I'm perfectly happy with having something that looks good, even if it's not 100% realistic. But that wraps up everything on the main Midway, and we can finally head back towards the Gemini Midway and Camp Snoopy areas. There's still a lot of work to do back there. We did a little bit of cleanup on some of the rides back here, such as Super Himalaya and Monster and Lake Erie Eagles. Not a whole lot going on, just trying to get the queues a little bit nicer and have some of the fencing and things make a little bit more sense. Nothing too groundbreaking. But as we go forward with some of these, I am taking in the opportunity to add a little bit more path decorations and foliage and things. Since I'm building out the outlines of these rides, I know where I'm going to have green space. And I figure it's a good opportunity to add some things in like that. Adding some bushes, add in some trees. Figure I might as well make things look as good as I can while I'm out here. One thing I'm a little bit bummed about that hasn't worked out very well for me is making some curved rails. You'll notice we try it here with Lake Erie Eagles and it doesn't really work out very well. I tried it also off camera a bit ago with all of the rides in Kitty Kingdom, since they actually have circular rails around all the rides rather than square ones. And I thought that using steeplechase track to kind of emulate that would work out, but because the steeplechase track is in the middle of the tile instead of on the edge, didn't really work very well, didn't look very good, didn't line up with everything else. So I'm going to stick with this square fence for now. Figure it looks good enough, probably not worth the effort to try to make the steeplechase track work for these kinds of rides. But anyway, moving on back into the Camp Snoopy area, we've got Pipe Scream and Wilderness Run, as I mentioned earlier, that have been in test mode for quite a while. This has always been sort of a problematic area because everything's pretty cramped. The figure 8 layout of Wilderness Run is really difficult to kind of squeeze in here with the orthogonal grid system of RCT. Tweaked the layout a little bit here so it wasn't butting up against Pipescream quite as much, and I think it worked out okay. This area also has a lot of tree cover, so it's a little bit hard to see what's going on, especially as someone who's never been back here to ride any of these rides and see how things are laid out currently. Google Street View is of course no help at all since this area has changed considerably since 2011. But I think I got something that wound up pretty close, looking at the photos on CP Insiders and the aerial footage from Google Maps. Hopefully it won't be too much of a squeeze when we get the ride builds for the rest of Camp Snoopy and the couple of non-ride buildings in here. There's like a restaurant, I think, and a gift shop as well. Maybe a theater? I'm not 100% sure. We haven't built those things out yet. Hopefully things don't get too crammed in here. I haven't forgotten any building markers over here that I've noticed, but I think we'll be in a good spot for when we get there. But I'm just focusing on these two tracked rides today, and we did fortunately have just barely enough room for both of them. With the way that we've tweaked Gemini's layout, it's a bit of a tight fit between Pipescream and Gemini, getting that midway through there. But yeah, after we did some complete overhauling of Wilderness Run's layout, I think the solution that we wound up here worked pretty well. We did have to switch the diagonal track that goes over the station to being straight to save us a little bit of space, a little bit of clearance, because I needed to have the entrance and exit on the other side of the station. But it worked out pretty well. We are butted up pretty close to the flat rides on the other side of Camp Snoopy. But I think with the fences and walls that we were putting in here, things are going to look separated enough that I think it worked out okay. Who would have thought that such a simple coaster, such a tiny little layout would give me such problems, but I guess that's what happens when you have a small coaster. You can squeeze it into a very small part of the park. And when trying to fit it onto a game map like this, you wind up with lots of problems that you never would have thought of. But I guess that's what I really like about this recreation. It's been a lot of little puzzles one after another that you have to solve. And solving those puzzles is pretty satisfying. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for today. We're getting a little close to the end of this phase. We've only got a few big coasters left and a couple flat rides to go, in addition to filling out the rest of Camp Snoopy, but I don't think it'll take us too much longer to finish all of these up, so I'm looking forward to getting these done. But as always, if you've got any comments, questions, or suggestions, please let me know. Thanks for watching.